Alright, in this video we're going to talk about answering counterplans. You have just had a counterplan run against you. You are the 2A and you are wondering what to do. This video tells you what. If you are negative, the answers you are going to hear are going to fall into one of these four categories. And if you are AF, you want to make the four types of answers that are going to be discussed in this video. The answers should follow the SPOT format: solvency, perm, offense, theory. We're going to break down each one of those and look at kind of what you're trying to do with those. But first, let's kind of remind you keywords, look at the formats that are typical for what a counterplan looks like so you can identify if a counterplan has been run against you in the one in C. There are keywords, counterplan, often the C/P plan text, or United States should. Remember that you're looking for something that looks similar, though not exactly the same as the plan text. There are two formats that are fairly typical. The first on the left is the sort of old school way of having the format as the counterplan text, the reason that the counterplan is not topical, the reason the counterplan has a net benefit, and a solvency card. The more modern way to run a counterplan has text and a solvency card. We're going to talk about the first category of arguments that you're going to be making, which I think are the most powerful ones and ones that you should rely on the most in a debate, and that's solvency, the S in the SPOT. You want to make arguments as to why the counterplan cannot solve for part of the affirmative. So the best way to do this is you are going to need to identify what the negative does different in their counterplan, and then articulate why that difference prevents the 1AC impacts from being solved. So if the counterplan is a state's counterplan and has the states do your plan instead, then you need to have reasons why the federal government is the only actor that's going to be able to solve for the 1AC impacts. You can also find or have short advantages that are called add-ons, and these can be read in the 2AC to answer the counterplan. But when you pick which add-ons you're going to read, you want to make sure that they exploit that difference between the 1AC and the counterplan so that the add-on is more explanation or an advantage that hinges upon that key difference between the counterplan and the plan. So if it's a state's counterplan, you need to have a add-on that is one or two cards long that it is something that relies upon federal government action. And if it's not federal government action, it wouldn't be able to solve for the affirmative. The second letter in SPOT is the P, and that means permutation. The permutation, you are going to explain why the plan and the counterplan can be done at the same time. If you remember from the previous video about counterplans, you are arguing about the competition. A common negative response to the permutation is that the perm will still link to the net benefit. So you as an affirmative need to be able to have explanations as to why the net benefit is nullified or there is no link to the net benefit because of the permutation. So remember that presumption switches when the counterplan has been run. To put differently, the negative must prove why the counterplan is better than the plan. So they're the ones who have the burden of proving they are the best policy. So if you can win the permutation, you can use presumption being on your side to articulate that there's no risk of the link to the net benefit. Not the best way to explain it, but this is how most judges are going to understand it. And so explain why your permutation solves the link to the net benefit, and you'll be able to pick up the debate. Offense. That's the O. Offense or disadds will mostly just have a link and an impact to the counterplan that don't apply to the affirmative. So if it's an agent counterplan, you're going to have a disadd that could be about how regulatory powers being increased destroys separation of powers, and that is bad. You want to be careful about reading these, however. Back in the day when dispositionality was a much more common practice, you would be able to stick negative teams with a counterplan and read these sort of offensive arguments here. In modern debate, because everything's conditional, all they have to do is no longer advocate for the counterplan, and your offense that you read here goes away. And so that's not, if it's not something that can be used in the 2AR, you don't want to read too much of it in the 2AC because it could get nullified or wasted very, very quickly. Theory is the last part, which is the T. There are different theory arguments as to why counterplans are cheating in particular ways. The first is, you can make picks are bad arguments. This is why plan-inclusive counterplans are bad. They make you debate against yourself. It's not based in the literature. Different things like that. Like if you blend picks bad with some sort of literature-based requirements that can occur, then you're going to be a lot more persuasive and have a lot more nuance to your arguments as to why picks are bad. There's also conditionality bad. This is a pretty standard argument that most people are going to say against counterplans or critiques. Condition counterplans are bad. Consultation counterplans are bad. You got to remember that theory arguments are not a slam dunk and usually an uphill battle to win, but they are easily a good way to create a time trade-off, especially with condition or consultation counterplans, because they know it's a weakness, and so they'll overcommit to answering those things. The point is that when you are creating your front lines and deciding how you are going to answer a counterplan, you want to think about, do you have all 4 letters in your front line to answer the counterplan? And as a personal piece of advice, I would argue that your most persuasive and best argument is going to be that solvency argument. And so if you can make clear distinctions about what the differences are between the plan and the counterplan, you're going to be able to articulate pretty good solvency deficits to the counterplan and be able to pick up a lot of debates.